We have been using art for about 40,000 years to engage into a conversation with nature and the universe. The art you see here is actually the oldest known form of art. We discovered it in Indonesia. It is about 40,000 years old, and it gives a history, a story of discussion between man, the universe, and spirit. Now you see, even before science or language existed, we tried to communicate through art. Now today we give art a very commercial value, and frankly this is a little bit limiting. Art can also be a fascinating vector to create a rapport between man and nature. Now art gave a very different understanding of the world and of ourselves. And the Vitruvian Man completely changed our perspective of the universe and our place in it. And it did so through the belief that the design and the function of the human body are an analogy for the design and the function of the universe. Now, art challenged the way we think about the universe. And it can be an amazing way to talk about our link to nature. Now, I was never really an art person. I never got educated in art. I didn't even have an interest in art. However, through the involvement in my company, I'm currently the CEO of a Chinese company established in Monaco. And through the involvement of my company in the world of art, I actually witnessed the power that art can have on sustainability issues. And that triggered my interest. And in particular, I got very fond of this piece of art, which became my favorite. Because to me, it prompted a thought that art, in its various forms, can be used to address sustainability issues. You see a little bit in this picture the movement of the man stepping out of a fishing net, sort of representing evolution, change, courage. You see, art is about taking a position. One can never really predict the way it will affect someone's behavior. It's a very, very subtle power that changes the world, one perception at a time. Now, art has the power to take a fact or a point of view and transform it into an emotional truth. And that emotional truth turns art into action. Now, the way it does that, it will excite your curiosity, which hopefully will lead to a debate and ultimately lead to change. Now, art has been used before to affect people's opinions. And we're all familiar with those two posters that you all know. Now, sometimes it can be done in a rather negative way. Art can influence you in a negative way. Sometimes it can actually be done in a very positive way, in a way that will transform the world for a better place. And as an example, in the 80s, the artist Keith Haring actually created this art to create a discussion around AIDS. Now, at the time, AIDS was completely incomprehensible. It had no scientific solution. And Keith Haring actually helped create a dialogue. And the social value of that is huge. Now, similarly to what Keith Haring did, artists now need to help us with our next plague, which is environmental issues. Look at this picture. This is an art piece currently on exhibit in Beijing. Beijing, probably the capital that suffers the most from pollution. Now, what do you think the artist tried to convey through this art piece? Is it about an evolution? Is it about a change in habits? Is it about new times? Because you see, the very nature of sustainability is its interconnectedness. And that means that small changes are critically important. These small changes add to the radical shift which is needed. And the role of art is very important in that process because it affects individual behaviors. And that's why we say art is a natural change agent. It shifts paradigms in many ways. Two more examples I'd like to point out. On the left-hand side, you see an art piece which is called Seeding the City. And that took place in Manhattan in the late 90s, And the concept was to plant 1,000 trees on Manhattan rooftops in order to bring awareness of the deforestation in Central and South America. Now, on the right-hand side, another art piece in Boulder, Colorado, called Connect the Dots. And here the concept was to place blue metal dots on trees at the level at which the water rose in a recent flood. Now, of course, the blue dots won't prevent any flooding, and the trees won't prevent any deforestation process. But what these do is actually bring awareness, focus people's attention. And in a sense, these are two vivid examples of artistic processes involved into engaging local communities and bringing about a very intimate dialogue. Now, also, this shows that art can be a vehicle to make both science and policy digestible and effective. In a way, it will take a very abstract concept, something that usually is misunderstood, and bring it to a very concrete concept, hopefully better understood. Now, let me surprise you. Let's talk a little bit about soup. What you see here is actually a shark fin soup. Now, shark fin soup is considered a delicacy in Asia. It is consumed on very special occasions. And it's really ingrained into the culture, especially in China. Think a little bit in terms of turkey for Thanksgiving in America, or caviar for Europeans for Christmas. Now, the problem with these soups is that it requires 100 million shark fins to be harvested this year alone to make these soups. And in a way, each shark fin represents a top predator that is being taken out of the ecological equation. Now, may I also mention that the process of harvesting these fins is actually quite cruel. You take the shark out of the sea, alive of course, take the fins while the shark is alive, and because the value is really in the fins and the fins alone, you throw back the shark in the sea, alive, probably doomed to a certain death. Now, when we talk about sharks, people tend to conjure up images of great white predator gnashing up at fishing boats or attacking swimmers. And frankly, this is a little bit unfair. The number of attacks is actually quite low. Let me show you a few statistics. Last year, 900,000 people in the world died because of mosquito bites. In America alone, 43,000 people got injured last year using their toilets. Don't ask me how. In the same time frame, 13 people got killed because of a shark attack. Now, in addition to that, sharks are necessary for the well-being of the oceans, and we, in turn, rely on the oceans to be alive. So really, we should be treating sharks as allies, not enemies. Now, the company I work for is the largest collector of contemporary art in China. And the love for contemporary art and the concern for ecological issues of the owners led them to create an exhibit, which is called On Sharks and Humanity. Now, that exhibit went from Monaco, where it started, to Moscow, Beijing, and on to Singapore. And the concept of that exhibit was to bring together the contemporary art of 30 Chinese artists who wanted to explore humanity's charged relationships with sharks through their art. Let me show you a few of the arts that were on exhibit. And let me point out the one that you see a net, I don't know if it's very clear, and that was in the Musée Oceanographique of Monaco, and the idea was to create a life-size shark net and to welcome the visitor and make the visitor feel trapped in that net, the same way maybe a shark would. Now, the impact of these exhibits is actually quite spectacular. 700,000 visitors saw the exhibit in the various cities, including 200,000 in Beijing alone. We did a survey at the end of the exhibit in Beijing, and we found out that 98% of the people who visited that exhibit stated they would no longer eat shark fin soups because of their visit. Quite spectacular. Now, of course, art alone won't change the world. It's not going to prevent any ecological disaster. However, in this fight for sustainability, art has a key role to play to help us in this evolution and revolution. One single art piece, one image, can change the world and create action and ensure that the discussion that took place 40,000 years ago in a cave in Indonesia goes on with ever-renewed energy and a deep sense of purpose. Now, may I end on a slight note? Isn't our planet the best piece of art there is? Thank you.